and around the globe. We thank you for joining us. And tonight, I'm alongside my colleague Uche, who has our business headlines. Over to you, Uche.
Thank you, Richard. And here is a look at what's coming up on Africa Like This. South Africa's economy registers unexpected growth in the first quarter of the year. And traders hope that U.S. sanctions on active militias will help to revive business activity in Rwanda's western border with the DRC. Of course, all of that coming up within the program, but for now it is back to you, Uche.
Thank you so much, Uche. Let's begin with our top story. Xi Jinping, General Secretary of the Communist Party of China Central Committee and Chinese President, and his wife, Peng Luyuan, have paid homage to the China DPRK Friendship Tower. They were accompanied by General Secretary of the Workers' Party of Korea and President of the State of Affairs of the DPRK, Kim Jong-un, and his wife, Ri Sol-ju.
Xi and Peng arrived at the China DPRK Friendship Tower, located at the foot of Mount Mudanfeng by car at about 10:40 a.m., where Kim Jong-un and Ri Sol-ju welcomed them. The DPRK military band played the national anthems of China and the DPRK. The honor guard slowly lifted a flower basket onto a platform. The ribbon on the flower basket read, "The martyrs of the Chinese People's Volunteers will live forever." All the personnel observed a moment of silence in memory of the soldiers. After the moment of silence, Xi and Kim observed the Guard of Honor's formation parade. Accompanied by Kim and Ri, Xi and Peng entered the Friendship Tower's Memorial Hall. Kim introduced the historical materials, photos and oil paintings that depicted the Chinese People's Volunteer Army fighting side by side with the DPRK people and jointly rebuilding their homeland. Xi carefully observed the list of martyrs of the Chinese People's Volunteers and told Kim the stories of the Chinese People's Volunteers who sacrificed their lives. Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un agreed that the years when China and the DPRK fought together in the 1950s are an enduring historical memory for both sides. They also agreed that both sides should jointly maintain the memorial facilities for the martyrs of the Chinese People's Volunteers, carry out distinctive revolutionary tradition education and ideological and moral education for teenagers, carry forward the great spirit of the war to resist U.S. aggression and aid Korea, and carry forward the great traditional friendship between China and the DPRK from generation to generation.
Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un have visited Central Cadre's Training School of the Workers' Party of Korea in Pyongyang.
Xi Jinping arrived by motorcade, where Kim Jong-un greeted him before the school's landmark, the monument to party founding. Hundreds of faculty members and students lined the pathway in welcome. with representatives presenting bouquets to the Chinese leader. Accompanied by Kim Jong-un, Xi Jinping entered a lecture hall where students were taking a class on the DPRK's foreign relations, with a focus on ties with China. The session paused as the two leaders arrived, prompting a standing ovation from the audience. They observed the lesson for several minutes, nodding in approval. After leaving the lecture hall, the two leaders toured the campus on an electric cart, receiving briefings along the way on the school's infrastructure and academic programs. In a wooded area between teaching buildings, Xi and Kim jointly planted a fir tree. The fir tree remains evergreen throughout the year, symbolizing the enduring and ever-renewing friendship between China and the DPRK. Afterwards, the two countries' top leaders witnessed the unveiling of a monument marking the tree planting. It bears the inscription, "The China-DPRK friendship endures forever," in Chinese and Korean. Amid warm applause from delegates and students, Xi and Kim shook hands and posed for photos before the monument.
Xi Jinping and his wife Peng Liyuan have attended a luncheon hosted by Kim Jong-un and his wife Ri Sol-ju in Pyongyang.
Kim Jong-un and his wife visited the Kumsunsan State Guest House where Xi Jinping and his wife were staying. Amid a light drizzle, the two couples took an electric car together to the banquet hall. The top leaders of the two parties and two countries held in-depth exchanges on consolidating and carrying forward the traditional China-DPRK friendship. Xi Jinping thanked Kim Jong-un for the meticulous arrangements made for the visit, saying the trip had deepened their appreciation for the warmth and friendship extended by the party, government, and people of the DPRK toward those of China. He said they had reached an important consensus on developing China-DPRK relations in the new era and conducted a deep exchange of views on maintaining regional and world peace and stability. He said the mutual understanding between the two sides has become deeper and more comprehensive, and the direction for future development has become clearer. Xi Jinping expressed his willingness to work with Kim Jong-un to jointly guide China-DPRK relations toward greater development and inject new, strong impetus into the socialist cause of both nations. Kim Jong-un stated that Xi Jinping's visit was a complete success, sending a positive message to the world about the further strengthening of DPRK-China friendship and cooperation, which has drawn high attention from all sides. He said this visit holds immense significance for the future development of bilateral relations and the region. Kim said the DPRK stands ready to earnestly implement the important consensus reached during this visit, promote tangible new results in bilateral cooperation, and push DPRK-China relations to scale new heights.
Xi Jinping, General Secretary of the Communist Party of China Central Committee and Chinese President, has concluded his state visit to the DPRK and departed from Pyongyang.
Along the route to the airport, people from all walks of life in Pyongyang line the streets, waving the national flags of China and the DPRK, as well as flowers and chanting slogans celebrating the friendship between the two countries. Kim Jong-un, General Secretary of the Workers' Party of Korea and President of State Affairs of the DPRK, and his wife Ri Sol-ju saw off Xi Jinping and his wife Peng Liyuan at the airport and hosted a grand farewell ceremony in their honor. Thousands of residents and young people stood in orderly formation to bid them farewell. Accompanied by Kim, she reviewed the honor guard. She waved to the crowd. He also shook hands with the senior DPRK officials who had come to see him off. Xi and Peng then exchanged warm farewells with Kim and Ri before departing.
Xi Jinping returned to Beijing on Tuesday afternoon after concluding his state visit to the DPRK. U.S. President Donald Trump says Iran shot down a U.S. Apache helicopter that was patrolling the Strait of Hormuz overnight. He said the two pilots involved were safe and unharmed, but warned that the U.S. will respond to the attack. This development comes hours after Trump said he was in the final throes of a peace deal with Iran and expects an agreement in the next 3 days. Trump also said he had warned Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that Israel could be left to fight alone if it resumes its war with Iran. He added that Tel Aviv gave Washington very late notice before the first exchange of fire between Iran and Israel since April's ceasefire. Iran and Israel have said they are halting attacks on each other, but warned the conflict is not over. Meanwhile, Lebanese authorities say at least 8 people have been killed in an Israeli strike on Tyre in southern Lebanon. The attack followed Israel's latest issuance of forced evacuation orders in the coastal city. The Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention say Ebola cases in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Uganda have surpassed 600, while the death toll is at 102. This comes amid operational constraints in the response efforts. Africa CDC latest update indicates that Uganda has had no new infections in the last 24 hours, while the DRC has had 45 new confirmed cases within that period. Ituri in the east of the DRC is the epicenter of the outbreak with a 94% caseload. Efforts to contain the virus are focused on reducing transmission, mitigating community impact, and preventing further spread. But these are being hit by a host of challenges. Humanitarian workers delivering medical supplies and relief items say they are risking their lives every day due to security concerns and mistrust within local communities. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa reports from Kinshasa.
Medical supplies are loaded onto a plane in the Congolese capital, Kinshasa, to support efforts to contain the Ebola outbreak in the country's embattled east. The deadly disease has been reported in the conflict-affected provinces of Ituri, North Kivu, and South Kivu. Despite the insecurity, aid workers from the UN and other humanitarian organizations continue to support the government efforts to curb its spread.
Only a few days ago, there were attacks between the town of Beni, the airport in Beni, and the town of Beni, which is the heart of our operation, along with Bunia, the epicenter, only a few hours up the road. So what we've been doing at World Food Program is building air support. Brought in a new jet, we brought in a new helicopter, opened up a new route from Bunia to Mangwala, finding ways to go around the insecure areas and make sure that the first-line health responders are safe.
Armed groups are operating in some of the gold mining towns in Ituri province that have reported Ebola cases. That, coupled with the mistrust of some community members, has seriously hampered the response effort. The government says it has reinforced security in the affected areas to keep health workers safe.
As you're aware, this Ebola response is cross-cutting. It involves many ministries, not just the Health Ministry. That's why in a recent meeting, the Ministries of Defence, Transport, Internal Affairs, Finance and Communication came together to look at all aspects of the response.
United Nations peacekeepers have also been deployed to some Ebola hotspots to help protect health workers and the local communities. The measure comes as the number of Ebola cases continues to rise. The government recently closed Bunia Airport to commercial flights just 5 days after reopening it. Authorities say the move is aimed at preventing the spread of Ebola within the DRC into neighboring countries like Uganda and South Sudan.
Humanitarian agencies say they are facing serious logistical challenges transporting personnel, medical supplies and laboratory samples around Ebola-affected areas in the east of the DRC. Their challenges have been worsened by the closure of Goma International Airport, a key hub for South and North Kivu provinces. The airport was closed last year by the M23 rebels after they captured it from government forces. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
One person has reportedly died in central Kenya following protests against a U.S. plan to set up an Ebola quarantine and treatment facility for infected U.S. citizens in the town of Nanyuki. According to local media reports, police also arrested 50 people after firing tear gas at demonstrators who had gathered in the town early on Tuesday. It comes a week after 2 people were killed in similar protests. A Kenyan court has issued orders blocking the quarantine facility setup, pending hearings on the case. However, U.S. military planes have continued to ferry in staff and equipment, and that's according to U.S. and diplomatic sources, as well as flight tracking data. Kenyan officials are now claiming the facility would also serve Kenyans and foreign nationals in addition to U.S. citizens. But U.S. officials have not confirmed this.
We are saying no to Ebola. We won't allow Ebola to enter our country. We will not accept. We oppose this facility.
We don't want Ebola in this country, and we are peaceful. We are demonstrating according to the Constitution. The Constitution is protecting us, but the police are trying to tear gas us, and we are not going to entertain them.
And now to Nigeria, where its security problems continue. Authorities in the northwestern state of Zamfara say armed groups known locally as bandits have abducted dozens of villagers after luring them to what was presented as a peace meeting. Police say at least 39 people were seized on Sunday in a forest near Magamin Didi village after attending talks aimed at easing movement restrictions and open dialogue with relatives of a local bandit leader. Residents and local officials believe the number to be much higher than that. Security forces say personnel and intelligence assets have been deployed to investigate. Meanwhile, locals report that some captives were released to deliver ransom demands. Kidnapping for ransom has exploded into one of Nigeria's most worrying security crises, with the bandits using the payments to fund their operations. Nigerian kidnapping victims recently rescued from Boko Haram captivity are now sharing their traumatic experiences. Nigerian troops raided a heavily fortified Boko Haram enclave in the Mandara Mountains of southern Borno State over the weekend, freeing 360 victims of abduction. CGTN Sharon Baranga brings us this update.
Residents of Ngoshe, a community near Nigeria's border with Cameroon, are recounting their ordeal after spending more than 3 months in captivity following a terrorist attack on their village. Nigeria's military says their rescue mission was driven by intelligence gathering. Some of the victims say despite enduring severe hardship, they were neither forced to convert to Islam nor were they subjected to sexual abuse.
The captors often said that the Nigerian authorities cared about our welfare, and they allowed me to communicate directly with their leaders. When we returned, the government responded quickly and helped us safely. Now I only hope to live peacefully in my community. My prayer is for lasting peace, stability and security in my community and across Nigeria.
Another survivor recalls the moment insurgents stormed her community and the challenges she faced during captivity.
We had just completed the dawn prayer and we were preparing to break our fast when we heard gunshot and explosions. The insurgents attacked our community and took us away. Life in captivity was extremely difficult. I became seriously ill. We are grateful to the military and the government for securing our release.
There are claims that a number of captives chose to remain with the Boko Haram insurgents, a revelation that has raised questions and surprised many observers. Borno State Governor Babagana Zulum visited the rescued victims at their temporary camp. He pledged support to those willing to return to their home, as well as those seeking resettlement elsewhere.
Here to support them with relief material, food and non-food items. Each and every household will receive food and non-food items. But most importantly, we are also interfacing with the community about their return. Those that are willing to return to this community, we are working with the Nigerian Armed Forces, as well as other security agencies, with a view to establishing institutional arrangement that will ensure their dignified return. Those that are not willing to return to their hometown, Borno State government will do everything possible to resettle them in a very safe place.
The insurgency in northeastern Nigeria continues to pose a major security challenge, with Boko Haram and ISWAP militants regularly carrying out attacks across the region. Years of violence have claimed lives, displaced thousands of people, and left communities across Borno State struggling to rebuild. For these newly rescued abduction victims, the journey back to freedom may be over, but the road to recovery is just beginning. Sharon Baranga, CGTN.
Time now for a short break. We shall reset and return with more Africa Live. Here's what's ahead. Coming up, we look at a new tech-driven initiative seeking to eliminate malaria in Tanzania's Zanzibar archipelago. Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. Mozambique now says 9 of its citizens had been killed in a wave of violent xenophobic attacks targeting migrants in South Africa. In a statement, Mozambique's information office said the government had initiated diplomatic procedures to repatriate the bodies of 6 victims. The attacks reportedly began in Mossel Bay in South Africa's Western Cape province before spreading to surrounding areas. Last Sunday, President Cyril Ramaphosa reaffirmed the government's commitment to addressing undocumented migration while strongly condemning acts of xenophobia and vigilantism directed at foreign nationals in several communities across the country. The European Union is now taking a tougher approach to illegal migration. The European Parliament recently approved sweeping reforms aimed at speeding up the deportation of non-EU nationals staying illegally in the bloc and tightening migration controls. CGTN's Robert Nagila has more on this development.
After years of political debate over migration guidelines, European lawmakers have backed new measures designed to discourage irregular migration. Under the revised rules, those issued with return orders will be required to cooperate with authorities and leave the EU territory. The proposals also allow EU member states to transfer migrants to designated third countries known as return hubs under agreements with the host countries. In some cases, migrants may be detained before removal if authorities believe they could abscond or pose a security risk. Experts say the measures reflect a broader global trend toward tighter migration controls, driven by economic pressures, security concerns, and domestic politics.
It's economic, it's political. There is that security. There's also the issue of cultural sensitivity, where people believe that their cultural identity is being changed because of large-scale migration.
Professor Ishmael warns African countries considering agreements with EU member states to host return hubs should carefully weigh the long-term impact of such agreements.
As Africans, we must at this point begin to reflect seriously if these hubs, even the incentives that are offered in the long term will be to our benefit. If not, then we have to simply say that we are sorry, we will not take this initiative.
In Africa, migration has also become a growing major political issue. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa this week pledged action on illegal migration following recent anti-migrant protests, while warning against incitement and xenophobia. Some experts say local authorities were slow to respond to public concerns over border management.
They needed to have a focus on border management or border security, all in the name of protecting national security, doing a threat assessment and determining risk.
The EU says its new measures are intended to strengthen border management while ensuring returns are carried out in an orderly manner. But the EU is not alone in devising such an approach. The United States has also adopted tougher immigration policies. The Trump administration has expanded third country deportation arrangements which send migrants to countries outside their homeland. Robert Nagila, CGTN.
Tanzania's Zanzibar archipelago has launched a new initiative aimed at eliminating malaria by 2029. Officials say it will involve drones and other modern technology which can find and destroy breeding areas. The 6-month pilot project involves Zanzibar's Ministry of Health, the World Health Organization, the Japan-based Soro Technology, and Tanzania's Ifakara Health Institute. CGTN's Isaac Lucando has more.
An AI-powered drone loaded with larvicide is ready for takeoff. The drone is part of Zanzibar's latest attempt to bring malaria infections down to zero. Health officials say the technology will support current efforts like distributing mosquito nets, indoor spraying, and rapid testing that they say is already having a positive impact.
We are doing the indoor residue spray for the entire Zanzibar. For the entire country. We continued like that from 2006 up to 2010, where the prevalence now came to be less than 1%.
Researchers involved in the latest project say climate change and shifting mosquito behavior are making it harder to control malaria using old methods alone.
Current evidence is showing that the mosquitoes, which used to be predominantly feeding inside the house and late at the night, they are evolving now, starting to bite outside and the early part of the night.
The World Health Organization says artificial intelligence can help locate mosquito breeding areas faster.
Drones will be taking pictures of breeding sites or areas where there's collection of water where mosquitoes are able to breed. But then at this era, the drones are also powered with an AI tool which is able to characterize or identify the risk of those breeding sites having stages of mosquitoes in them.
Sora Technology, the company behind the system, says similar projects have already been tried in countries like Ghana and Mozambique with some degree of success.
We want to integrate these results as the evidence, then we spread this technology to all African countries to reduce the malaria.
According to Zanzibar health officials, malaria rates on the islands have fallen to about 0.1%, one of the lowest in sub-Saharan Africa. But officials warn that cases brought in from mainland Tanzania still pose a risk, making prevention and monitoring very important. World Health Organization reports show that Africa still accounts for about 95% of global malaria cases and deaths. Health experts in Tanzania say combining artificial intelligence with mosquito control could help Zanzibar keep up its progress and move closer to being declared malaria-free in the coming years. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
In Kenya, plans to redevelop a section of the Nairobi National Park has drawn controversy and sparked demonstrations. Police arrested several protesters on Monday, among them Kenya's former Chief Justice. Authorities say the project complies with environmental laws and will improve animal welfare and visitor education. Here's CGTN's David Mbithi with that report.
Demonstrators assembled near Nairobi's animal orphanage, opposing what they say are plans to rebuild on land reserved for the animal sanctuary. The protesters were confronted by riot police, who fired tear gas at them and arrested 9, including Kenya's former Chief Justice David Maraga. Activists accuse authorities of pushing through a project they say could shrink one of Kenya's best-known protected areas, rejecting plans to expand facilities and parking spaces for a nearby convention center, which is still under construction. They say public participation was inadequate and the environmental assessment lacked transparency.
We were just here to try and raise our voices, let the record read that this is a national park. It is not a national parking, and that's what we're here to defend. So it happened without public participation. They have started the works, and we demand that they cease and restore that park to what it was.
The Nairobi National Park is famed for being the only park in the world within a capital city. It is home to over 100 animal species, including 4 of the big 5 wildlife and more than 400 birds. The Kenya Wildlife Service says the project aims to strengthen wildlife conservation and improve animal rescue and rehabilitation services. But campaigners argue it could threaten protected parkland and set a precedent for further changes within it.
As the United Green Movement, we join these other groups to condemn this act and demand that it must be stopped. We have this as a heritage that we should protect for our children and grandchildren.
The protesters also decried plans to relocate the Nairobi Animal Orphanage to a different site. However, the Kenya Wildlife Service says the relocated and expanded orphanage will improve animal welfare and veterinary training, as well as allow for a better visitor experience. David Mbidi, CGTN.
Lake Naivasha, located in Kenya's Great Rift Valley, is one of East Africa's most important freshwater lakes. However, in recent years, water levels in the lake and across the region have continued to rise due to the effects of climate change and persistent heavy rainfall. The expanding shoreline has severely affected the local ecological environment, as well as residents' livelihoods and daily lives. Joy Karukijuma reports.
In recent years, Several Rift Valley lakes in Kenya, including Lake Naivasha, Lake Baringo and Lake Nakuru, have experienced continuous water level increases and expanding surface areas. Among them, Lake Naivasha has expanded significantly compared with previous years. The constantly shifting shoreline has had a serious impact on local agriculture, fisheries and residents' daily lives.
It has caused a lot of damage to us. Because of this reason, which water has swollen, it has made fish to... There's no fish here at the lake, at the coast of at the shores of the lake, because most of the dust and waste which were there, it has been swallowed with water. So water it has been contaminated, and you know fish cannot stay where it is contaminated. So we have to go further end to go and look for fish somewhere else. So you see, we are using a lot of resources, the fuel, to go very far to fish. Yet the other day we were just fishing around here.
In addition, the ecosystem around Lake Naivasha itself is also changing. As the shoreline expands, wild animals such as hippos are moving closer to residential areas, increasing the risk of human-wildlife conflict.
Hippos are coming very close as they look for food, and they are destroying our crops, making our farm production go down. There were some farms down there where the water is now, and since the water levels have risen, we cannot continue farming there. It has forced us to move up here, and here there is not enough space for farming.
Experts say the increase in extreme rainfall events across East Africa in recent years is one of the key factors driving the continued rise in water levels across the Rift Valley Lake region. In addition, deforestation, soil erosion and development activities around the lake basin are further intensifying ecological pressure in the area.
And from our research, we find that whenever we had the increase in the sea surface temperatures in the Indian Ocean and also in the Pacific, in the Equatorial Pacific Ocean, now it causes the rainfall in the Eastern Africa region to increase, especially like during when we have the El Nino. Other research have said that there has been a contribution of sedimentation, and because of the soil erosion due to runoff, and also because of the changes in the land use, where people are farming now in some of those areas which were before not being utilized.
Experts point out that the impact of rising water levels in Kenya's Rift Valley Lake region is no longer limited to population displacement and property losses. It is also having long-term effects on local ecosystems, biodiversity, and the relationship between humans and wildlife. In response, experts are calling for continued improvements in climate monitoring and disaster early warning systems, while also advancing long-term adaptation measures such as community resettlement, ecological restoration, and watershed management in order to reduce the risks posed by future extreme weather events. Joy Kirukijuma, CGTN.
And Uche is in the studio, and that means it's time for our business segment. Over to you, Uche.
Thank you, Richard. And coming up on Africa Light Biz. South Africa's economy registers unexpected growth in the first quarter of the year. And traders hope that U.S. sanctions on active militias will help to revive business activity in Rwanda's western border with the DRC. Well, let us start off in South Africa. The country's economy expanded more than expected in the first quarter of this year. We saw output growing in nearly all sectors. Now, Statistics South Africa says that GDP grew 0.5% quarter on quarter on a seasonally adjusted basis in the first 3 months of this year. 9 of the 10 sectors tracked by the agency grew in the first quarter. The finance sector made the largest contribution to growth, while manufacturing was the only one to contract. Now, fixed investments declined after 2 consecutive quarters of expansion. Of course, Africa's biggest economy started to pick up a pace last year, and investor sentiment improved. But Statistics SA also warns that the impact of the war on Iran is likely to show up in its next report for the second quarter. Shifting focus to Rwanda now, the International Monetary Fund has approved the country's request for a new $250 million credit facility. Now, it is expected to help the country deal with tighter global financial conditions, while also helping to protect social and development spending. The global lender has also authorized an immediate disbursement of $35.7 million. And according to the IMF, Rwanda's economic growth far surpassed expectations. It reached 9.4% in 2025. However, the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran threatens to slow its growth to below 6.8% this year. Higher global oil and fertilizer prices, also caused by the war, are fueling inflation and fiscal pressures in Rwanda. Meanwhile, the U.S. recently imposed sanctions on commanders from both the M23 rebel movement and the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda militia. It accuses them of fueling instability in eastern DRC. And this move comes as Washington continues its efforts to broker peace between the DRC and Rwanda. Now, communities along the shared border say that lasting stability remains critical for both security and trade in both countries. Residents and traders in Rwanda's western border region are hoping for lasting peace as well as a revival of business activity there.
For many years, we worried about insecurity from armed groups operating near the border. Recently, we have felt more secure, but what we really want is lasting peace that allows people to live and do business normally.
The sanctions on FDLR are welcome. Many people believe lasting peace in Rwanda and the DRC depends on addressing the FDLR threat. If stability returns, fighting will stop and cross-border trade can thrive again.
And heading to Senegal now, officials from the International Monetary Fund are due to arrive in the country next week for emergency talks with leadership. Of course, Senegal's finances have been in disarray since the discovery in 2024 of billions of dollars in debt, which was hidden by the previous administration. Now, how to handle the crisis was reported to have caused a huge political shift in the current administration last month. Well, in a bid to win over the visiting IMF delegation, the government has now made early payments to foreign bondholders. But will it be enough amid those growing divisions at the top? CGTN's Najma Abdirazak tells us more.
Just weeks after the dramatic falling out between President Bassirou Diomaye Faye and his former Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko, Senegal's government is scrambling to manage its mounting debt pressures. In a surprise move, the government made early payments to foreign bondholders this week on 2 of its euro and dollar denominated notes. The payments come as the West African country remains locked out of international markets following the discovery of massive hidden debt. How to handle that discovery was reportedly a major point of contention between Faye and his once close-knit ally, Sonko.
En 2024, quand le nouveau président est arrivé,
in 2024, when the new government took office, the IMF came in June of that year to disburse funds. However, the government of the time, led by former Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko, refused because an audit of the accounts was underway. And during that audit, they discovered that there was hidden debt, which is what made the country's economic situation somewhat worse. Nevertheless, the country continued to function. Instead of turning to international markets, Senegal turned to local markets. We turned to the WEMU single securities market and the BRVM securities market, with EPAs taking place up to 4 times a year. This enabled us to mobilize resources to finance the development of certain projects and also the running of the state.
The discovery of billions in hidden debt pushed Senegal's debt to 132% of GDP, forcing the IMF to freeze its $1.8 billion program. Senegal has since relied heavily on regional markets, but experts say that strategy is now adding serious strain on liquidity. Even with oil revenues helping create a trade surplus, experts warn Dakar is crowding out private investment at a time when it faces over $1.3 billion in domestic debt payments in the coming weeks.
Today, Senegal is running a surplus in 2025 thanks to oil products. But as we know, it is true that this surplus creates an illusion because there is a very damaging decline in imports of industrial products, and this too shows that there is a break on private investment and also on local investment. So, as we say, we're living in a crowding out economy because the state is absorbing a great deal of liquidity to the detriment of the business that needs it.
An IMF delegation is due in Dakar next week, but what the meeting can achieve remains to be seen. With political tensions rising between the presidency and the National Assembly, both of which have different views on the IMF, economists fear any deadlock could push Senegal into deeper chaos. Najma Abdirazak, CGTN.
Well, that is all for now on Africa Live Biz, but still to come on Global Business Africa. We'll bring you the outcome from Kenya's monetary policy meeting and how certainly it will affect the country's economy going forward. All of that coming up top of the hour. For now, it is back to you.
Thank you so much, Uche. And we are not done just yet. We've got your sports segment coming up. Here are the headlines. Coming up in sports, the 2025 African Referee of the Year, Omar Artan, is denied entry into the U.S. days to the start of the FIFA World Cup. Welcome to Sport on Africa Live with me, Richard Nta. Let's get going with football. The World Cup gets going on Thursday, but it won't involve one of Africa's top referees. Somalia's Omar Artan has been denied entry into the United States. U.S. Customs and Border Protection said on Monday that a Somali national who had planned to referee at the tournament had been denied entry after arriving at Miami International Airport from Istanbul on Saturday. While the statement didn't mention the person by name, Artan is the only World Cup referee from Somalia. FIFA later confirmed the news. In its own statement, officials said the organization was not involved in America's immigration processes and was informed by authorities that Artan's status, quote, will not be changed at present, close quote. Artan was named the 2025 African Referee of the Year and oversaw 2 games in the 2025 AFCON tournament. Somalia has expressed its disappointment over that decision by U.S. authorities to deny a visa to Somali referee Omar Abdul Kadir Artan, preventing him from officiating at the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Mohamed Kahia reports from Mogadishu.
The Somali government says the decision by the U.S. authorities to deny entry to FIFA referee Omar Abdul Qadir Artan is regrettable. Artan was among the match officials selected by FIFA to officiate at the 2026 FIFA World Cup, which will be co-hosted by the United States, Canada and Mexico. In a statement, Somalia's Ministry of Youth and Sport said efforts by the government in coordination with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and FIFA to resolve the issue and secure Artan's participation were unsuccessful. Artan is expected to return to Somalia, having already been en route to the U.S. The case has sparked debate among Somali football supporters, with some calling on FIFA to consider assigning Artan to matches in Canada or Mexico rather than excluding him entirely from the World Cup officiating duties.
The U.S. has the absolute right to grant or deny anyone entry into its territory. But as a Somali, I am disappointed with FIFA's decision to completely shut down the dreams of this young man who is a role model to millions of upcoming young people. The US is not the only host here. FIFA should consider Omar officiating matches in other host nations like Mexico and Canada, which are more open and welcoming. Remember, the US has had issues with journalists and teams like Iran.
Somali referee Omar Artan is currently in Turkey, from where he is expected to travel back to Mogadishu. Football legends like former Arsenal skipper Ian Wright have spoken about issues related to US hosting this World Cup, which many believe is not as open and welcoming as is expected of host country of the global spectacle. Hamid Kahir, CGTN Mogadishu, Somalia.
Cape Verde are the latest African squad to arrive in North America for the World Cup. The Blue Sharks, who are making their World Cup debut this year, will be using the Tampa Bay Rowdies training facility as their official base camp. They face an uphill task to qualify for the knockout stages. They face European champion Spain in their Group H opener on June the 15th, before games against Uruguay and Saudi Arabia. Head coach Leitao Brito says he wants the world to know what Cape Verde can do on the big stage. Senegal traveled to the World Cup on back of a very successful Africa Cup of Nations tournament. Their famed supporters carried the team to a controversial finals in the Moroccan capital Rabat. Well, just how much the support the Lions of Teranga will receive in the U.S. remains to be seen. Senegal is among several qualifiers to face travel restrictions, meaning dozens of loyal fans won't be able to attend. It means Senegalese authorities might have to come up with a plan B for support. Here's CGTN's David Mbithi with more.
The 12th Gainde and Alakasa are the two official and iconic supporters groups of the Senegal national football team. As true national institutions, they serve as a cultural window for the country, uniting Senegalese people behind the Lions of Teranga. In the stands, they transform every match into a vibrant celebration of traditions, incorporating dance, song, body paint and traditional attire, instilling the players with a fierce determination to win. For many, the absence of these supporters at the World Cup in America will not only be disadvantageous for their team, but also a significant loss to this global sporting celebration. However, the president of the 12th Senegalese Gainde fans group has told everyone not to worry.
The Senegalese national team will travel to the United States alongside their supporters. The Ministry of Sports, the Football Federation and the Senegalese government are currently making every effort to ensure that the supporters enjoy the best possible travel and stay conditions.
Some less optimistic analysts believe that the chances of Senegalese supporters traveling to the United States are slim.
It's going to be difficult for Senegalese fans to travel to the United States, as the Minister for Sports has said that organizing travel for them will be challenging.
The president of Dakar Espoir Football Club believes that it is already time to consider a plan B to ensure that Senegalese players do not end up without supporters in the United States.
The only viable solution is to reach out to the diaspora and mobilize this large Senegalese community, which is based not only in the United States, but also in other countries in the Americas and across Europe, to support the Lions of Teranga and spur them on to victory.
The 12th Gainde and Alakasa supporters have thousands of fans throughout Senegal and the diaspora. Hopes remain that they can still attend and support the Lions of Teranga, who are in what many believe to be the group of death with France, Norway and Iraq. Their presence will certainly add to the festive atmosphere and the rich cultural diversity of the tournament. David Mbidi, CGTN.
Meanwhile, Iran's Football Federation says it cannot process ticket allocations just days before the World Cup starts. Supporters who had already made travel plans now stare at the prospect of not attending their team's matches. The federation did not say who made the decision to withhold the tickets. In a statement, the Iranian Federation said it had already begun the ticket sales process for the matches, but could no longer provide them to fans. Each participating federation at the World Cup receives 8% of the tickets for each of their matches to be allocated to fans according to their own criteria. Iran will play their first two Group G games in Los Angeles against New Zealand on June the 15th and Belgium on June the 21st, before facing Egypt in Seattle on June the 26th. Well, that is it for this edition of Africa Live. Remember, you can send us your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on digital media platforms. For the team, I'm Richard Nta saying thank you so much for watching. Up next is Global Biz with Uche. So stay tuned and stay here on CGTN.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, global markets lost some steam this Tuesday. Investors are waiting anxiously for economic data coming out this week as progress for a resolution of the Middle East conflict still seems uncertain. However, emerging market assets did rally on the day, with investors closely watching that rally in AI stocks and also currencies rebounding after Iran and Israel paused their hostilities. The MSCI's Emerging Market Equity Index was up 3.2% on the day. In South Africa, despite mining stocks continuing to drag the all-share lower, the JSE All-Share Index did close in the green on the back of some positive momentum in financials today. Now, also coming up on the show. Outrage in Sudan after Ethiopian Airlines refuses to accept Sudanese pounds for ticket bookings. Traders in Rwanda back U.S. sanctions on militias in the DRC, saying it will help to restore trade in the border region. And Nigeria generates electricity and cooking gas from tons of food waste. Well, let's start off in the DPRK. President Xi Jinping, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China's Central Committee and also Chinese President, and his wife, Peng Liyuan, have paid homage to the China DPRK Friendship Tower. Now, they were accompanied by General Secretary of the Workers' Party of Korea and the President of the State Affairs of the DPRK, Kim Jong-un, and his wife, Ri Sol-jo.
Xi and Peng arrived at the China DPRK Friendship Tower, located at the foot of Mount Mudanfeng by car at about 10:40 a.m., where Kim Jong-un and Ri Sol-ju welcomed them. The DPRK military band played the national anthems of China and the DPRK. The honor guard slowly lifted a flower basket onto a platform. The ribbon on the flower basket read, "The martyrs of the Chinese People's Volunteers will live forever." All the personnel observed a moment of silence in memory of the soldiers. After the moment of silence, Xi and Kim observed the Guard of Honor's formation parade. Accompanied by Kim and Ri, Xi and Peng entered the Friendship Tower's Memorial Hall. Kim introduced the historical materials, photos and oil paintings that depicted the Chinese People's Volunteer Army fighting side by side with the DPRK people and jointly rebuilding their homeland. Xi carefully observed the list of martyrs of the Chinese People's Volunteers and told Kim the stories of the Chinese People's Volunteers who sacrificed their lives. Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un agreed that the years when China and the DPRK fought together in the 1950s are an enduring historical memory for both sides. They also agreed that both sides should jointly maintain the memorial facilities for the martyrs of the Chinese People's Volunteers, carry out distinctive revolutionary tradition education and ideological and moral education for teenagers, carry forward the great spirit of the war to resist U.S. aggression and aid Korea, and carry forward the great traditional friendship between China and the DPRK from generation to generation.
Now, as the visit continued, President Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un visited the Central Cadres Training School of the Workers' Party of Korea in Pyongyang. Take a look.
Xi Jinping arrived by motorcade, where Kim Jong-un greeted him before the school's landmark, the monument to party founding. Hundreds of faculty members and students lined the pathway in welcome. With representatives presenting bouquets to the Chinese leader. Accompanied by Kim Jong-un, Xi Jinping entered a lecture hall where students were taking a class on the DPRK's foreign relations, with a focus on ties with China. The session paused as the two leaders arrived, prompting a standing ovation from the audience. They observed the lesson for several minutes, nodding in approval. After leaving the lecture hall, the two leaders toured the campus on an electric cart, receiving briefings along the way on the school's infrastructure and academic programs. In a wooded area between teaching buildings, Xi and Kim jointly planted a fir tree. The fir tree remains evergreen throughout the year, symbolizing the enduring and ever-renewing friendship between China and the DPRK. Afterwards, the two countries' top leaders witnessed the unveiling of a monument marking the tree planting. It bears the inscription, "The China-DPRK friendship endures forever," in Chinese and Korean. Amid warm applause from delegates and students, Xi and Kim shook hands and posed for photos before the monument.
And President Xi Jinping and his wife Peng Liyuan also attended a luncheon hosted by Kim Jong-un and his wife Ri Sol-ju in Pyongyang. Take a look.
Kim Jong-un and his wife visited the Kum Sun-san State Guest House where Xi Jinping and his wife were staying. Amid a light drizzle, the two couples took an electric car together to the banquet hall. The top leaders of the two parties and two countries held in-depth exchanges on consolidating and carrying forward the traditional China-DPRK friendship. Xi Jinping thanked Kim Jong-un for the meticulous arrangements made for the visit, saying the trip had deepened their appreciation for the warmth and friendship extended by the party, government, and people of the DPRK toward those of China. He said they had reached an important consensus on developing China-DPRK relations in the new era and conducted a deep exchange of views on maintaining regional and world peace and stability. He said the mutual understanding between the two sides has become deeper and more comprehensive, and the direction for future development has become clearer. Xi Jinping expressed his willingness to work with Kim Jong-un to jointly guide China-DPRK relations toward greater development and inject new, strong impetus into the socialist cause of both nations. Kim Jong-un stated that Xi Jinping's visit was a complete success, sending a positive message to the world about the further strengthening of DPRK-China friendship and cooperation, which has drawn high attention from all sides. He said this visit holds immense significance for the future development of bilateral relations and the region. Kim said the DPRK stands ready to earnestly implement the important consensus reached during this visit, promote tangible new results in bilateral cooperation, and push DPRK-China relations to scale new heights.
And in closing, President Xi Jinping, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China's Central Committee, and of course China's president, concluded his state visit to the DPRK and departed from Pyongyang.
Along the route to the airport, people from all walks of life in Pyongyang line the streets, waving the national flags of China and the DPRK, as well as flowers and chanting slogans celebrating the friendship between the two countries. Kim Jong-un, General Secretary of the Workers' Party of Korea and President of State Affairs of the DPRK, and his wife Ri Sol-ju saw off Xi Jinping and his wife Peng Liyuan at the airport and hosted a grand farewell ceremony in their honor. Thousands of residents and young people stood in orderly formation to bid them farewell. Accompanied by Kim, she reviewed the honor guard. She waved to the crowd. He also shook hands with the senior DPRK officials who had come to see him off. Xi and Peng then exchanged warm farewells with Kim and Ri before departing.
Of course, President Xi Jinping returned to Beijing on Tuesday afternoon, hereby concluding his state visit to the DPRK. Well, on that note, let's shift our focus back to business now and take a look at our corporate highlights this Tuesday. Africa's largest telecoms company, MTN, is taking another shot at Africa's video entertainment market. Now, the group has announced a plan to launch a streaming platform called MTN-One TV. The platform will offer a mix of free-to-view, advertising-supported, pay-per-view, and subscription-based content models. Now, the move is MTN's most ambitious attempt yet to build a pan-African content business, tapping into the group's 307.2 million subscribers. The company has not yet disclosed which of the 16 markets that it operates in will receive MTN-One TV first. And South Africa's state power utility Eskom has launched a new business unit focused on developing utility-scale renewable energy projects. Now, Eskom Green will target energy-intensive sectors such as mining and manufacturing, offering contracts for renewable power backed by storage. This new venture aims to have about 6 gigawatts of carbon-free electricity available up to the year 2030, drawing on a pipeline of renewable energy and storage projects under development. According to Eskom, it will operate within the holding company before being separated into a wholly owned subsidiary with an independent board. Meanwhile, U.S. tech giant Amazon will build its first African satellite ground station in Kenya as it looks to offer faster internet and mobile phone services on the continent. According to disclosures from Kenya's Communication Authority, Amazon applied for a license through its newly registered local subsidiary, Amazon Kuiper Kenya. It is seeking a 15-year international gateway license for its Amazon Leo satellite internet project. Its plan is to set up a ground gateway from where it can transmit internet to Kenya and other markets. The project will compete with Elon Musk's Starlink. And finally, the oil major BP is undergoing a major shakeup as its new CEO, Meg O'Neill, reorganizes the oil giant's leadership and reporting structures to focus on oil and gas. Now, this new structure will see an operating segment focused on resource development and production, and another focused on customers and markets. From July 1st, Gordon Birrell will be Executive Vice President of Upstream, while Richard Harding will take on the same role for Downstream. The new plan unwinds structural changes made back in 2020 when the firm pivoted towards low-carbon ventures and away from fossil fuels. BP says it will clarify accountabilities and it will also enable faster, more effective decision-making going forward. And that is a look at our corporate highlights this Tuesday. We are going to take a short break now, but still to come on the show. Kenya's Monetary Policy Committee maintains its benchmark lending rate at 8.75%. And limited access to machinery in some regions becomes the focus of this year's China-Africa Agri-Tech and Industrialization Forum.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Well, let's now turn to the latest on the Ebola outbreak that began in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo and has now spread across borders here on the continent. Here's what we know so far. The Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says that Ebola cases in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Uganda have now surpassed 600, while the death toll is at 102. Now, the DRC government had said it recorded 35 new cases since its last briefing on Sunday. That brings the total number of confirmed cases to 550. Meanwhile, in neighboring Uganda, which is also affected, authorities have confirmed 19 cases so far, and that includes 2 deaths. Meanwhile, the UAE is the latest country to tighten its travel restrictions for all travelers coming from the DRC, Uganda, and neighboring South Sudan. Now, South Sudan has not yet recorded any cases, but it still falls within a zone regarded by African health authorities as high risk. At least 15 nations have enforced similar measures. Of course, the outbreak caused by the rare Bundibugyo strain of Ebola was announced back on May 15th, although officials say it went undetected for weeks. It has now left authorities behind the curve and struggling to bring it under control. Now, at the epicenter in eastern DRC's Ituri province, officials say that the presence of armed groups is continuing to hinder their response efforts. Now, of course, efforts to contain the virus are focused on reducing transmission, also mitigating community impacts and preventing further spread. But these are being hit by a host of many challenges. Humanitarian workers delivering medical supplies and relief items say that they are risking their lives every day due to security concerns and mistrust within local communities. Yes, CGTN's Chris Ochamringa reporting on that from Kinshasa.
Medical supplies are loaded onto a plane in the Congolese capital, Kinshasa, to support efforts to contain the Ebola outbreak in the country's embattled east. The deadly disease has been reported in the conflict-affected provinces of Ituri, North Kivu, and South Kivu. Despite the insecurity, aid workers from the UN and other humanitarian organizations continue to support the government efforts to curb its spread.
Only a few days ago, there were attacks between the town of Beni, the airport in Beni, and the town of Beni, which is the heart of our operation, along with Bunia, the epicenter, only a few hours up the road. So what we've been doing at World Food Program is building air support. Brought in a new jet, we brought in a new helicopter, opened up a new route from Bunia to Mangwala, finding ways to go around the insecure areas and make sure that the first-line health responders are safe.
Armed groups are operating in some of the gold mining towns in Ituri province that have reported Ebola cases. That, coupled with the mistrust of some community members, has seriously hampered the response effort. The government says it has reinforced security in the affected areas to keep health workers safe.
As you're aware, this Ebola response is cross-cutting. It involves many ministries, not just the Health Ministry. That's why in a recent meeting, the Ministries of Defence, Transport, Internal Affairs, Finance and Communication came together to look at all aspects of the response.
United Nations peacekeepers have also been deployed to some Ebola hotspots to help protect health workers and the local communities. The measure comes as the number of Ebola cases continues to rise. The government recently closed Bunia Airport to commercial flights just 5 days after reopening it. Authorities say the move is aimed at preventing the spread of Ebola within the DRC into neighboring countries like Uganda and South Sudan.
Humanitarian agencies say they are facing serious logistical challenges transporting personnel, medical supplies and laboratory samples around Ebola-affected areas in the east of the DRC. Their challenges have been worsened by the closure of Goma International Airport, a key hub for South and North Kivu provinces. The airport was closed last year by the M23 rebels after they captured it from government forces. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Let's shift our focus now. Ethiopian Airlines has sparked some outrage in Sudan. That's after it refused to accept Sudanese pounds for ticket bookings in Port Sudan. Now, the airline is demanding cash payments in US dollars only. And of course, this comes as the Sudanese pound continues its sharp decline against foreign currencies, with the dollar exceeding 4,000 pounds per dollar on the parallel market. Now, travelers are saying the policy is forcing them to buy dollars from the black market, and that's adding a heavy financial burden. Aviation officials and economists have called on authorities to urgently review the airline's policy. Well, let's find out more about this. Let's head to the ground. Joining us in Port Sudan is Naba Mohideen. Naba, always great to have you with us on the show. Now, let's start off with some insight into why exactly Ethiopia Airlines did this. Why is this decision sparking so much debate in Sudan? And certainly, what kind of impact will this have and has it had on the sector and Sudan's overall economy?
Thanks, Ochi. Actually, the debate right now is not about one airline that is not accepting the Sudanese pound, but it's about the confidence in the local currency, which is, of course, is raising concerns for hundreds of thousands of travelers, and also it adds more weight and burden on the Sudanese economy. This, of course, will impact other airlines and aviation sectors that will make the same step because right now we are facing severe shortages of foreign currency that is, of course, now is increased by the wartime and by the business because right now the main expenditure in the Sudanese economy is for the war, and also there is a demand, high demand on the foreign currencies to meet the humanitarian needs, to meet the imports, and to meet the expenditure of the war. So, of course, this will make a very tangible impact on the travelers who are earning their income in the Sudanese pound, and also it will create a high demand on the US dollars, which, of course, will impact the exchange rate even further. So, on the economy, there is a scarcity of foreign exchange. Such steps by foreign companies and airlines and many foreign companies, not only aviation sector, will of course make more demand on the US dollars and will impact the economy and of course the passengers in the first place.
Right, Naba. And as you said, it's all about confidence, and of course not just airlines but companies, foreign companies in general, usually make this move to protect themselves when there's economic instability in the country, or as you said, foreign exchange shortages in the country. What is the current situation in terms of access to foreign currency in Sudan? What is the current state of its foreign exchange markets?
Actually, Ochi, there is a severe shortages of foreign currency, and it's so obvious, and everybody right now is seeing the direct impact of the conflict on the economy. While I'm talking to you right now, in 1 week, the foreign currencies exchange rate has declined comparing to the Sudanese pound. The Sudanese pound declined to 21% in 1 week after as a result of many things, our wartime economy, and also as a result of banning some sectors inside the economy, including imports. This created a high demand on the US dollars to meet imports, to meet the humanitarian needs. So generally there is severe shortages, and people understand that this, of course, this is a direct impact of the wartime economy, and companies are protecting themselves, but in the same time, it creates a scarcity, and it creates more pressure on the Sudanese pound. There is shortages, very obvious shortages, and the demand is increasing every day because the economy right now, there is less economic activities. The economy is weakened by the war, and the expenditure is very high on the war. So yes, companies are protecting themselves, but it creates more less confidence in the cedis bound and more demand on the US dollars.
And still on that note of companies protecting themselves right now in Sudan, are we seeing more and more foreign companies currently facing any challenges when it comes to repatriating their earnings? Because we know that's one of the major concerns.
Not only foreign companies, Ochi, actually businesses and individuals right now are protecting themselves and protecting the revenues and the annual plans of earning. They want assurances that they can transfer those local funds to their headquarters without any restrictions, because we know that Sudan's banking system has been disrupted by the war, and also we are seeing less economic activities and less exports and sabotage of 60% of economic activities. So yes, there is expectations that many foreign companies and also local companies and individuals will create more pressure on US dollars to protect their revenues, to plan for the revenues, and to make sure that they can actually transfer those funds without restrictions to their headquarters. So up to now,
well, it looks like we lost Naba there, but certainly, as always, great to have you with us, Naba. That was Naba Mohideen joining us there in Port Sudan. Well, let's move on now to Kenya. The country's Monetary Policy Committee decided to maintain the central bank rate at 8.75%, of course, during its monetary policy meeting this Tuesday. Now, that's despite the conflict in the Middle East disrupting global supply chains and leading to a sharp increase in energy prices and transportation costs in the country. Now, Kenya's overall inflation increased to 6.7% in May from 5.6% in April, and that's on the back of higher energy prices. But we did still see it remain within that target range of 2.5 to 7.5%. Core inflation rose to 3.2% in May from 2.8% in April. Of course, mainly driven by higher fuel prices. Now, processed food inflation remained relatively stable. It was supported by lower prices of sugar and maize products. Non-core inflation increased sharply to 16% in May from 13.4% in April, and that's on account of higher energy prices, particularly fuel and gas prices. Now, economic growth, or GDP, is projected at 4.9% this year. That's compared to the previous projection of 5.3%, of course, reflecting that continued uncertainty. But let's delve into all those numbers now with Teddy Muthoka. He's a research analyst at Arvocap Asset Managers, and he joins me now in the studio. Great to have you with me in the studio, Teddy.
Thank you.
Now, of course, there was quite a lot of anticipation and discussion around this particular MPC meeting and MPC decision, given the current global realities and, of course, the impact it's had on economies, inflation, blah, blah, blah. What's your take on the decision to hold rates? Did it come as a surprise to the market? And certainly, what was the tone that you sort of got coming out of the MPC's announcement today?
All right, so thank you for having me. I will say that the market was a bit split. You could argue a 50 by 50 probability that there will be a 25 basis point increase or a maintained rate with regards to the central bank rate. And I would also say that from the notice that has been shared, or the briefing that has been shared by the central bank, is that they anticipate that this is a transitory environment, meaning that they expect that the Middle East conflict will taper off really soon, and that they will really not want to hike rates at this particular time, exacerbating what they've been working on for the past previous couple of months. Yes.
And it's interesting that you say it was sort of split.
Yes.
Because we know the Kenya Bankers Association actually came out. They were pushing for further tightening of the central bank rate.
Yes.
And actually what they said, they argued that it will help anchor inflation expectations, support price stability in the medium term. Give us a sense of what experts think about what their argument was.
Yeah. Right. So from the Kenya Bankers Association side, one of the things that they've been primarily looking at is the non-performing loans within the banking sector, and getting to see where we've come from 2023 all the way to 2024 to 2025, and getting to see that right now, especially when you look at the banks'
results, that being for financial year 2025 and Q1 2026, you will see that there's been a major improvement towards NPLs. But their concern was that if we hike or do not hike at this particular point in time, we are placing ourselves at risk of getting back into a high NPL environment, which will mean lower credit growth and lower credit access to the overall economy. Yes.
And I guess the next question will be to experts. How then do you see this decision to hold rates impacting private sector activity, impacting credit and lending practices going forward?
All right. So I think one of the things we can give commendation to the CBK is that private sector growth stood in at around 9.9%, if I'm not wrong, of this particular review period, up from, I believe, around 7% thereabouts. And you could tell that they've really done the work, looking at the previous rate cuts that they've done, around 8 of them from last year. But the concern at this particular point in time is, do we want to let go of this number that we've really worked on towards as a central bank when it comes to private sector growth and letting it taper off? So I think right now we'll say it's at a balance where they would want, they're acknowledging, first of all, that there are inflationary pressures, effects to the global and local economy as well, but we still have leeway to mitigate and maintain and foresee if this situation will worsen further or it will come to an end, and what that will mean for the broad economy.
And of course, as you mentioned, the central bank sort of said we're going through a transitionary period. But I want to get more sense of the tone you got, because was it cautiously optimistic, cautiously optimistic, very optimistic? I'm trying to get the other side in my head and say it, in a good way. Because they did note, they said there's a need to continue monitoring the evolution of global prices and the second round effects on inflation. They lowered their growth forecast as well, 4.9% from the previous forecast of 5.3%. So what's your take on the bank's outlook for the economy and the risks ahead?
Definitely cautious. It's plain and simple, and it's cautious. And even when you compare with some of our neighbors, like South Africa recently hiked theirs by 25 basis points as well. And so when it comes to the local economy, even when you look at the press briefing, you will see the need to anchor or support their decision by factors such as the FX reserve situation, where we have around 13.2 billion, translating to 5.6 months of import cover. Also getting to look at stable food prices due to a general healthy weather environment, if I may put it that way. So we will say that it's very cautious, that we do not want to push it further on as we want to, but the risks are evident across the board, which is also justified by the numbers that they've shared. Inflation ticking upwards towards the 7.5 range, looking at lower GDP estimates as well, and also other pressures which are also coming about, such as domestic borrowing being 85% of the total debt situation in the nation. So noting that if we hike at this particular point, there's much liquidity in the market, and what investors will push towards is higher yields on domestic borrowing, which is 85% of the nation's debt capacity, will really worsen things in the mid to long term.
Well, before we leave you, Teddy, quickly, I wanted to find out what has been the response to its decision, and as an expert yourself, what do you think about that decision?
All right, thank you. So I will say that in the short term, probably yields might taper off, but not as much, because investors are well aware of what's taking place in the global markets. You're starting to see also a re-rating in the global markets, looking at the performance of the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 out of the jobs report, and also CPI in the United States being expected tomorrow. So looking at that, investors are well aware that this thing is here, and also looking at the situation in the Middle East, we know that this is going to be sustained for quite a long period of time. And so factoring that in, and also on our end, we believe that in as much as the rate is there, there's now heightened pressure, especially towards August, that by the time they're coming down to do the next MPC meeting, and remember, the same time we'll have banks releasing their half-one results at the time. So a lot of these pressures towards the central bank rate are now starting to mature and bloom within this period.
Well, thank you. We certainly hope to have you back in August to discuss what happens. Thank you so much for joining us in the studio today. Of course, that was Teddy Muthoka, research analyst at Arvo Cap Asset Managers, joining us here in the studio. Let's shift our focus now. Communities along the shared border between Rwanda and the DR Congo are saying that lasting stability remains critical for both security and trade. Now, the United States recently imposed sanctions on commanders from both the M23 rebel movement and the FDLR militia. They accused them of fueling instability. Well, as our correspondent Richard Nta reports, residents of Rwanda's western border region believe that such pressure could lead to lasting peace in that region.
For decades, communities along the Rwanda-DRC border have lived with consequences of insecurity spilling across the frontier. Armed incursions linked to the FDLR, a militia rooted in the perpetrators of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, have remained a major concern for residents living near the border. More recently, fighting involving the M23 rebellion in eastern Congo displaced thousands of civilians into Rwanda. Yet, some residents say the conflict has also pushed FDLR elements deeper into Congo, reducing their presence near the border and bringing a rare sense of security to communities that have long lived under threat.
For many years, we worried about insecurity from armed groups operating near the border. Recently, we have felt more secure, but what we really want is lasting peace that allows people to live and do business normally.
Last Tuesday, the United States imposed sanctions on senior commanders from both M23 and the FDLR. Washington says the measures target individuals responsible for prolonging the conflict despite ongoing peace efforts. The sanctions come months after Rwanda and the DRC signed a US-backed peace and economic framework aimed at restoring stability and attracting investment into the region. The conflict has also taken a toll on trade. For border communities in Rubavu and neighboring Gome, movement restrictions, insecurity and uncertainty have disrupted business activities that support thousands of livelihoods.
The sanctions on FDLR are welcome. Many people believe lasting peace in Rwanda and the DRC depends on addressing the FDLR threat. If stability returns, fighting will stop and cross-border trade can thrive again.
Despite the challenges, traders say they remain hopeful that increased international pressure on armed groups could help create conditions for more stable commerce.
We want peace from both sides. If stability returns, trade will improve and people on both sides of border will benefit.
The conflict has reshaped trade patterns in the region. While the DRC remains one of Rwanda's most important export destinations, long instability has affected cross-border commerce and encouraged business to seek alternative markets. At the same time, international partners continue to push for political solutions that would allow economic activity to recover. For residents along the border, however, the focus remains less on diplomacy and more on achieving a durable peace.
We have lived with conflict for too long. What people want now is peace, security and the chance to work and provide for their families.
Earlier this year, Rwanda rejected separate US sanctions imposed on Rwanda's defense force and senior military officers, arguing that the measures unfairly targeted one side of the conflict and misrepresented the security dynamics in the eastern Congo. Richard Nta for CGTN, Kigali, Rwanda.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a short break now, but still to come on the show. There are fears that weak airlines could fail if the Middle East conflict drags on. And the world's first consumer-grade wing-in-ground craft makes its debut on the eastern Chinese city of Suzhou.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
Let's now turn to the latest on the U.S.-Iran conflict. U.S. President Donald Trump says that Iran shot down a U.S. Apache helicopter that was patrolling the Strait of Hormuz overnight. He said that the two pilots involved were safe and unharmed. But he also warned that the U.S. will respond to that attack. Now, this development comes hours after President Trump said he was in the final throes, that's in quotes, of a peace deal with Iran, and that he expects an agreement in the next 3 days. Now, Trump also said that he'd warned Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that Israel could be left to fight alone if it resumes its war with Iran. He also added that Tel Aviv gave Washington very late notice before the first exchange of fire between Iran and Israel since April's ceasefire. Now, Iran and Israel have both said they're halting attacks on each other, but they warn that the conflict is not over just yet. Meanwhile, Lebanese authorities say at least 8 people have been killed in an Israeli strike on Tyre in southern Lebanon. That attack followed Israel's latest issuance of forced evacuation orders in the coastal city. Moving on now, weak airlines could fail if that Middle East conflict continues to drag on. That's according to Emirates President Tim Clark. He said his airline had no plans to cut capacity, and that's despite financial pressures from the conflict. Now, Clark also says Emirates Airline will keep routing passengers via Dubai to various destinations such as India and Australia, while also taking precautions such as carrying extra fuel.
The ticket price is very much conditional on what the oil price does. And at the moment, the oil price fluctuates between 107.10 down to 95, depending on what's going on. If they stay at that level and we have a degree of safety of operation, then we will continue what we're doing. There's no way that we're going to cut back or reduce anything. We're ready to really move quickly if it goes south, I should say north, it gets better, and we'll also move to move if it goes south. We are now operating probably nearly 80% of our fleet. 96% of all the stations, the airports that we fly to are now back in place in all the countries. And surprisingly, we're doing really well. The seat factor is about 70%. We're cash positive. We're just waiting for some kind of resolution to this, but we're certainly operating in a very robust manner.
Well, let's shift our focus just slightly. The world's first consumer-grade wing-in-ground craft has made its debut in the eastern Chinese city of Suzhou. Now, aimed at the global market, experts say that it marks another example of how Chinese innovation is competing internationally. Chen Tong tells us more.
It's not a plane, and it's not a ship.
This is the world's first consumer-grade wing-in ground craft. That is to say, it's able to skim over the water.
Between 30 and 80 centimeters above the water, its maximum speed can reach 85 kilometers per hour. This craft is developed by domestic